Hi everyone, and welcome to ESET's presentation of zero-day attacks and trillion-dollar profits. My name is Tony Anscombe, Chief Security Evangelist at ESET, and on our webinar today I'm joined by two of my incredible colleagues who are going to present. Amelia Foss, Senior Marketing Manager, and Matt Moss, Sales Engineer. But before we begin, I want to cover a few items relating to your viewing experience. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All of the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around and get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your media player or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. At any time during the presentation, click the toys question mark icon at the bottom of your screen to submit a question, and we'll try and answer as many of those at the end of the presentation as we can. And moving on, there's a resource list near the top right. It provides extra assets and links related to ESET that may be useful to you. And an on-demand version of this webcast will be available approximately 1 hour after the webcast and can be accessed using the same URL link that was sent to you earlier. Now with that, we're going to start this webcast with a short video. So let's begin.
Hello everyone, I am the narrator, and today we're going to pay a special visit to my old friend Johnny the admin, and maybe even surprise him a little bit with a custom application that I built just for him. Let's see what Johnny the admin thinks of this neat new tool. Hello, Johnny the admin. I haven't been by to chat with you in quite some time.
Oh, hey, the narrator. How'd you even get in here? I'm a little busy right now with, admin stuff. It's great seeing you again. We've recently been dealing with a lot of ransomware, and you've always been very knowledgeable about computer security. Do you have any advice that you can share?
I may have something that can help you out here. Go ahead and open up a web browser and type in the following URL. https://thisSite-is-legit.com/cybersecurity/tools/ransomware.exe.
Well, okay. You never steered me wrong before, the narrator. Let's give it a shot.
Oh, neat. Would you look at that?
Oh, neat. Would you look at that? ESET Dynamic Threat Defense is now in action. We recently switched to ESET Endpoint Security with ESET Dynamic Threat Defense. The upgrade to ESET Dynamic Threat Defense has been super helpful recently, as it automatically sends samples that might be suspicious to the ESET Dynamic Threat Defense cloud-based servers for further analysis, and it looks like ESET thinks your tool is suspicious. But hey, don't worry, 90% of samples sent to ESET Dynamic Threat Defense are detonated and fully analyzed within 5 minutes. We shouldn't have to wait long before we can run this neat new tool that you built just for me. We didn't have any problem switching to using ESET Endpoint Security on our Windows workstations, and ESET Dynamic Threat Defense is a really nice upgrade to what's already an incredibly effective and lightweight anti-malware solution. It was really easy to get ESET Dynamic Threat Defense working. I just needed to get a license for it and activate our endpoints with it after making a couple of changes to policy. We even turned on something called Proactive Protection. When an executable is sent to the ESET Dynamic Threat Defense cloud-based servers for further analysis, we basically can't run it until the analysis comes back or we hit a configurable timer. Oh, can you wait here for just a few minutes? Carl from the security team needs me to stop by his desk ASAP for some reason. Let me lock my screen.
Now that Johnny the admin's gone, we have some time to chat. What Johnny the admin doesn't know is that the tool I wrote for him is a new strain of ransomware that I carefully crafted to get past his previous anti-malware solution. I had no idea that they changed to using ESET for protection on their machines. And with ESET Dynamic Threat Defense activated, I'm willing to bet that Carl from the security team might be wise to what's happening here. All I needed him to do was run it! It would have pulled up a funny cat video, which would have been my cue to skedaddle while Johnny the admin's files got encrypted in the background. Oh well. Let's get out of here before Johnny the admin comes. Too late!
Hey! Get back here! You're the narrator. That was ransomware. Carl from the security team told me all about it.
So I hope that sparked some interest, and just a moment I'm going to pass across to Amelia to begin the presentation. But before we do so, if I could ask you, on your screen you should see a poll question. It would be great if you could let us know whether you're an ESET customer or a partner. Just to give you a moment to select, that would be great. So I'm going to pass that baton across to Amelia. Please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. And thank you all for being here. Let's go ahead and jump in. I think it's no secret to anyone on this call that the cybercrime industry is growing exponentially each year. Now, take a minute to think about what I just called it, the cybercrime industry. Maybe you don't think about cybercrime as an industry, but I'm going to tell you today why you really should start. Cybercrime is big business. In fact, the industry as a whole is estimated at $1.5 trillion annually. Now, given the size and the profitability of this industry, cybercriminals today have the money, the resources, and the motivation to invest back into R&D to build even more sophisticated malware, with the goal of getting around the security that companies like yours have in place. And they are doing this for huge financial rewards. Today's high-earning cybercriminals can take home more than $166,000 per month. This makes it well worth their time to continue to develop under-the-radar malware that can get around the existing defense layers. And just how does $1.5 trillion break down? Well, here are some updated figures from the same report. It's called Into the Web of Profit, Understanding the Growth of the Cybercrime Economy by Dr. Michael McGuire. One thing to note here, while ransomware is at the bottom of the list with just a mere $1 billion in annual profit, that figure is expected to climb significantly over the next 5 to 10 years. Also take note that data trading is third on this list, and we'll talk about data breaches here in a minute. And so now that you've seen the revenue side of cybercrime, let's now get into the havoc that this industry wreaks. Here are some updated FBI cybercrime stats. As you can see, complaints, total losses, and business-level compromises are rising each year. Two things to note here. These figures do not account for lost business, time, wages, etc. Also, it's noted that many businesses never even report their financial loss, so these numbers could be even higher. And to personalize this threat even further, here are two examples of recent ransomware attacks that have had devastating effects. First, as reported on by Forbes, the University of California, San Francisco was hit by the NetWalker criminal gang on June 1st. The school's IT staff raced to unplug their computers to stop the spread, but unfortunately, it was too late. The hackers originally demanded $3 million, but eventually settled for just over $1 million to get their files back. And another devastating example of a ransomware attack. This was an Arkansas-based telemarketing firm, and sadly, this company sent over 300 employees home and told them to find new jobs, all right before Christmas. This happened after their data recovery efforts failed. So how is this happening? How are cybercriminals getting around the existing security software in place? Well, one popular way is by creating new malware that security software has never seen before. Zero-day attacks are attacks that are just that, brand new, never-before-seen threats. And as their birthday present, these successful zero-day attacks get to claim a patient zero victim. So for patient zero, should you suffer a zero-day attack, such as a ransomware attack, which we'll get into here in a minute, the most likely means of entry to your system and network will have been through an unknown or suspicious file. In the case of known malware, detecting and categorizing suspicious files is a relatively simple process. The security on the endpoint recognizes the file and immediately quarantines it. New files, however, are a bit more tricky. Your software needs to learn what the file intends to do before it can determine whether it is harmful or safe. And this is the piece that's getting more and more sophisticated from our cyber criminal community. Blocking these threats requires a behavioral approach to detection. Your endpoint security will use in-product sandboxing to determine what the file might do. So in other words, your endpoint security runs the file in a safe, virtualized environment on the endpoint machine to determine whether it's safe or harmful. However, incoming threats are getting more and more sophisticated by the day. In many cases, the file that your endpoint security comes across may not be harmful in and of itself. It may be that the files are instead agents of something malicious, say that can be delivered to download, or maybe they enable components of something that is truly destructive down the line, like a ransomware attack. In this case, the file acts like a sleeper cell waiting for orders. Now, before we get into exactly how ESET recommends making sure you are not patient zero, let's go over some terminology just to make sure we're all on the same page. So first up, APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. APTs are repeated cyber attacks that attempt to exploit vulnerabilities to gain access to information systems. The idea here is that once access has been gained to the information system, it will steal that information over a long period of time. This is a popular technique for breaching the healthcare IT system. And the other terminology we need to be familiar with today is ransomware. Ransomware is a form of malware that encrypts the network files and are only restored when the victim pays a ransom to get them back. And as we saw with the case of University of California, San Francisco, that ransom can reach into the millions of dollars. This payment is also usually paid in the form of Bitcoin, which can add just even more complexity for businesses who may be unfamiliar with how to transact in online currencies. Ransomware most commonly enters through a phishing attack where an unsuspecting employee clicks on an email attachment that is masquerading as a file that they otherwise should be able to trust. And while that sounds simple enough to avoid, just simply don't click on suspicious files in your email, well, think again. Here's some recent examples of ransomware emails that we have come across. And as you can see, they're pretty sophisticated. Spam has definitely grown up in recent years. And we've already covered the revenue intake for the cybercrime industry as a whole. Let's look at some of the recent stats on the cost of a data breach. These are from the 2019 IBM Security Cost of a Data Breach report. As you can see, becoming a victim of an attack can be extremely costly for businesses. This is, of course, on top of the reputational damage and loss of confidence from your customers and even your employees, plus legislation fines, legal fees from regulations such as GDPR, HIPAA, SOX, CCPA, just to name a few. So how do you avoid becoming patient zero? Well, in addition to your endpoint security and other layers of security that you may have, including encryption, two-factor authentication, training your employees, ESET recommends a cloud sandbox solution, and ours is called ESET Dynamic Threat Defense. Now, before we jump into the cloud sandbox, I just want to quickly show you where this product fits into the ESET product ecosystem. Our goal is to provide our customers with a complete holistic approach to security. Our products focus on 4 main pillars: prevent, detect, respond, and predict. And as you can see, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense really comes into play during that detect and respond phase. We do recommend a multi-layered approach to security here. So while we're focusing on just the ESET dynamic threat defense today, we do encourage you to look into our other new solutions to build out a comprehensive security portfolio. So why Cloud Sandbox? Well, the best way to really protect against today's advanced malware is to actually run suspicious files on an operating system and understand their behavior. If the file truly is ransomware or an APT, running it is the best way to uncover it. In many cases, however, this will mean sacrificing an operating system. In addition, to fully understand the file's behavior, that operating system will need to run and actively work with the active file. And this is where powerful processes such as machine learning and AI programs come into play. However, beyond potentially sacrificing that operating system, running those advanced programs is going to require a lot of processing power, which would really hinder productivity if we were to run this level of analysis on your endpoint machine. So a cloud sandbox is basically a beefed up version of the in-product virtualized sandbox that you have on your endpoint security. Instead of running the analysis within the resource constraints on the endpoint, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense transfers the suspicious files to a cloud environment and runs the analysis in a full operating system. What does the cloud sandbox offer that the end product doesn't? Well, because it is not limited to the space available on the endpoint, this cloud environment can run full analysis, which relies on those advanced programs such as that machine learning and the AI that we talked about. These are processes that are just more suited to specialized hardware, hardware that's built using GPUs capable of running the necessary code many times faster than the speed of a high-end laptop. And remember, you didn't buy your computers just to run anti-malware software all day. So while endpoint protection calculates what the file might do, ESET's Cloud Sandbox runs it in a real operating system to uncover its true purpose. And remember, this is vital because not all suspicious files are harmful in and of themselves. Many act as that agents or more destructive programs. Combining the intelligence of ESET endpoints in product sandbox with the fast cloud-based processing power that ESET Dynamic Threat Defense provides just ensures that your business is fully armed against advanced attacks while your day-to-day operations remain uninterrupted. Some of the questions that we get are, how does this compare to ESET LiveGrid? Well, for those that may not be familiar, ESET LiveGrid is an optional service that collects new malware streams from the endpoint software that have it enabled. It analyzes files in our headquarters sandbox and updates the community of users with this data. While they are similar in that LiveGrid is also a cloud sandbox environment, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense offers faster and more granular level analysis. Think of it as your VIP LiveGrid experience. It's a premium upgrade for priority service, if you will. If your company does become that unfortunate patient zero, you will be protected from the threat. Your sample jumps the line ahead of the LiveGrid samples, and 90% of them are analyzed within 5 minutes. Once the threat is analyzed and identified, your endpoint and all the endpoints at your company will be updated ahead of the LiveGrid community. ESET Dynamic Threat Defense also accepts a broader range of file samples, including documents, scripts, installers, among others. It also offers more granular level analysis, as files can be classified as clean, suspicious, highly suspicious, or malicious, whereas LiveGrid is just simply clean or malicious. Now remember, this is important as we talked about how many files appear to be clean when in fact they may not be. Additionally, status and results will be displayed and logged by the ESET Security Management Center, just giving you further insight into your security environment. Now let's talk about ransomware. Ransomware effectively breaks in and then locks the door behind itself, making it practically impossible to resolve once the attack has happened. So as zero-day or never-before-seen threats go, this is at the top of the list of things to avoid. Your endpoint security product includes Ransomware Shield, which is designed to detect and block processes that resemble the behavior of known ransomware. Your endpoint Ransomware Shield provides a very solid layer of protection. But do remember, this is an arms race against a $1 trillion cybercrime industry and all the resources that they have. So on the occasion that they succeed in getting past that first layer of defense, the best and possibly only way to identify the sample is to run it. And the only safe place to run it is in a cloud sandbox environment. Now, attached in the resources, you can find a case study of a large pharmaceutical importer. This company receives many outside executable files each day through automation processes, and they wanted to protect against hidden malware contained within those files, which this just simply was not feasible on-premise. So read the case study to see how they used ESET Dynamic Threat Defense along with some of our other enterprise-level protection products, including ESET Enterprise Inspector and Premium Support, to ensure the safe operations of their company. And now, before I pass over to Matt for a more technical deep dive of this product, I'd like to let you know about a new offer we have for organizations that are interested in implementing a cloud sandbox. We currently have bundled solutions that allow you to get ESET's award-winning endpoint protection along with our cloud sandbox solution, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, for significant cost savings of up to 50%. This is a really great way to boost your security for a very attractive price. So if you'd like to learn more or get a demo, go ahead and let us know by answering the survey at the right of your screen. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt Moss to run through a technical deep dive of ESET Dynamic Threat Defense. Matt, over to you.
All right, Amelia, thank you so much for that warm introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt Moss, and I'm a sales engineer for ESET North America. And prior to this role, I actually worked a lot in IT, all kinds of weird positions, and that kind of leads into what we're going to be talking about first with respect to getting ESET Dynamic Threat Defense to work. Now, during the course of this conversation up until now, we really haven't talked about the technical details behind getting ESET Dynamic Threat Defense to work, so let's spend some time talking about that in particular. First off, do I need to stand up another server? Do I need to install any additional applications? Do I need to do anything locally on these machines in order to get ESET Dynamic Threat Defense to work? Well, no, you actually don't. And that's the beauty of this upgrade to an existing ESET endpoint protection product. This is a very, very fantastic, easy-to-use tool that is incredibly simple to get set up and running, and you guys are going to see a lot of benefit from having this in your environment, especially if you are concerned about zero-day or targeted attacks. Now, with regards to requirements, you do in fact have to be running the latest and greatest with respect to ESET security products. What that means is you'll need to be running ESET Endpoint Antivirus or Security version 7 and later, and that's going to be our product that can help protect your Windows workstations. Additionally, we also support the use of ESET Dynamic Threat Defense on ESET Mail Security version 7 and later, as well as ESET File Security for Microsoft Windows Server version 7 and later. And if you need more details about all of these requirements that I'm talking about here today, please take the time to go ahead and check out our documentation site at help.eset.com, which will in fact contain additional details. Now, with regards to the management console that you are required to use, because do keep in mind, this solution here, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, does in fact require a management console in order to activate and configure ESET Dynamic Threat Defense. As a result, you must be using ESET Security Management Center version 7 or later, or ESET Cloud Administrator, and on top of that, you must have a working ESET business account or an ESET MSP administrator account that is synchronized with that ESET management console. And as we go through the rest of these technical slides here, it's going to be pretty obvious as to why that is the case. Now, if you are a regular non-MSP ESET customer, in order to activate EDTD, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, and get that working in your environment, there's only a few simple steps you basically have to follow. The first one being, go ahead and purchase that ESET Dynamic Threat Defense license. Your second step is going to be importing that license into your ESET business account. So now you guys can see why it's important to have a working ESET business account that is set up inside of your ESET Security Management Center server. Then, at that point, you want to synchronize your ESET Security Management Center server with your ESET business account, and I do suspect that a lot of people who are currently using ESET have already done that. Then, you're in a good position to run that ESET Security Management Center activation task with the ESET Dynamic Threat Defense license selected. Essentially, what you're doing here is you're just activating this upgrade of the endpoint protection solution. At that point in time, all you need to do now is configure the appropriate settings within policy in your ESET Security Management Center server. And at a minimum, that just involves enabling the ESET Live Grid feedback system and also enabling ESET Dynamic Threat Defense. Now, if you are an MSP, there's going to be slightly different steps purely because you will be using the ESET MSP administrator for your licensing needs as opposed to the ESET business account. Now, with regards to your steps here, you're going to basically start off with adding an ESET Dynamic Threat Defense license to your customer within the ESET MSP administrator. Then you're going to go ahead and synchronize your ESET Security Management Center with your ESET MSP administrator credentials. At that point in time, you're going to be all set to run that ESET Security Management Center activation task with the ESET Dynamic Threat Defense license selected. And then it's just the same steps as before, configuring that ESET Dynamic Threat Defense settings within policy in your ESET Security Management Center. Now, what we actually added with respect to version 7.2 of our endpoint protection products is the ability to configure something called proactive protection. And you guys actually saw that in the video that we showed at the beginning of this webinar. What this gives you the ability to do, as long as you're running ESET Endpoint Security or ESET Endpoint Antivirus version 7.2 and later, is effectively postpone allowing a user to run an executable that they download through specific methods or basically pull into a machine through specific methods until a configurable timer is hit. As a result, you can basically make your users wait 5 minutes or until the analysis comes back, at which point in time, if that sample is in fact considered clean and not malicious or suspicious, depending on the threshold level that you select, that user will then be able to run that file. Now, as we can see here, we can see some supported avenues of approach with regards to where these samples actually come from with respect to sending them off to ESET Dynamic Threat Defense and ensuring that proactive protection takes place. As you can see here, we do in fact support a wide range of web browsers, email clients, archiver utilities, and removable devices. So if that unknown executable, let's just say as an example, is found through one of these methods, that's going to have the potential to have that sample sent off to the ESET Dynamic Threat Defense servers for further analysis. And then at that point in time, if proactive protection is in fact configured, it will kick in and prevent the user from running that sample until that analysis comes back or that configurable timer is hit. Now, we do, in fact, have a polling question up here right now. Go ahead and answer that if you guys can. And at this point in time, we've kind of come to the end of the webinar. All of the content that we prepared for you has, in fact, been presented. Now we're in a good position to actually go ahead and start our questions and answer portion. So if you have any questions based off of anything that we've talked about during the course of this webinar today, now is your chance to ask them.
So thank you, Matt, and thank you, Amelia. That was enlightening. We do have a question from Dorothy, Matt, already. Let me tell you what the question is. Our organization operates without a server. We all have individual laptops, and all our documents are created, maintained, and managed through Google Suite online. Is EDTD something we need?
You know what? I do actually have a good answer for that. Now, if you are in fact operating your environment without an ESET Security Management Center server in order to actually manage and monitor those specific machines, then EDTD, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, might not be best for you purely because you do in fact need that management console in order to activate this upgrade of your endpoint protection products. That being said, if you're currently in a position where, let's say, you have a lot of laptops that are out and about across the internet, and you want to get that management server in place so you can start doing that monitoring and managing, or even use this to take that next step in order to activate ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, then let us know if you might be interested in something like the ESET Cloud Administrator. That might be a good fit for you.
Great. Just to remind everybody, you can submit questions by clicking on the question mark icon at the bottom of your screen. I think this is another question from, I've got a question from David. So another one for you, Matt. What's the difference between endpoint security and endpoint antivirus?
Fantastic question, and this, oddly enough, is a question that I know the answer to very, very well at this point. ESET Endpoint Security and ESET Endpoint Antivirus are two products that you can use to protect your Windows workstations. But there is a difference between the two products. That being, ESET Endpoint Security comes with a few additional modules. Now keep in mind that the real-time file system protection that comes with both products is the same. With the ESET Endpoint Security, you do in fact get some additional layers of security that you can use to further protect your endpoints. That's going to be a localized anti-spam module, a web control module that allows you to restrict access to categories of websites as opposed to just explicit URLs, and also a two-way host-based firewall, and some of our other products actually work quite well with that firewall in terms of pulling in some additional information. If you're ever interested in the EDR solution, Endpoint Detection and Response, we do in fact have a product called ESET Enterprise Inspector, and that does deal quite well with that firewall.
Thank you, Matt. There's a few questions from a number of people around licensing and pricing. What I'm going to suggest is that you reach out to your ESET representative or the reseller that's sold you your ESET product and ask them about licensing. As Matt said in the latter half of the presentation, you do need a separate license to turn on EDTD. I think I've got that right, haven't I, Matt?
That is correct, 100% right.
Right. So I think that answers two or three questions that we have in there for questions. Now, another question that's just cropped up, Matt, is about privacy. So if a file is sent to the cloud, how does the file remain private?
Well, we actually built an entire knowledge base article kind of around that whole concept with respect to security and privacy regarding ESET Dynamic Threat Defense. What I can tell you is that all the samples that are going to be sent to the ESET Dynamic Threat Defense clusters are encrypted and sent over HTTPS. They're then stored on a dedicated storage server with limited access to ESET employees for kind of obvious reasons. On top of that, the data is going to arrive in an anonymous format. Our systems really only have access to the customer ID from an ESET business account, but that's not going to be associated with any data that's sent from a particular computer. As a result, it's pretty much anonymous. On top of that, you do in fact retain control over how long we retain these samples on the ESET Dynamic Threat Defense servers. You have basically the ability to have them deleted never, after 30 days, or even immediately after analysis. So if you're curious to have more details with respect to privacy and security with regards to ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, I kind of urge you to do a quick little search there for that article that I mentioned, and you can probably pull it up pretty easily by doing a search for ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, Security, and Privacy.
Thank you. So we have a question from Joel, and I'm going to pass this one to Amelia, because I think this was actually on one of your slides, and maybe you could just reiterate it. How long does it take for a file that's sent to threat defense to actually be tested and get back to the customer?
That's a great question. So in 90% of the cases, this is all going to happen in 5 minutes or even less. So within 5 minutes, the file will be detected, it will be analyzed, and it will be sent back to your organization. And not only your computer, but all of the endpoints at your organization will also be protected. So like I said, within So 90% of the cases, that's going to happen within 5 minutes.
So thank Amelia, I'm going to pass this one to you as well. We have another question of how do we actually stop employees clicking on these emails and opening these attachments at the source, because that would be a good place to actually fix this. That is a great question.
That is a good question. So in addition to the layers of security that we recommend, making sure you've got strong endpoint protection, making sure your policies are up to date, adding on, these layers of defense such as encryption, two-factor authentication, a cloud sandboxing. We do really recommend continually focusing on education for your employees. And in fact, ESET has a great solution for this. It's our ESET Cybersecurity Awareness Training. We have a few different options available, so I do encourage you to check that out. Talk to your ESET rep or talk to your ESET partner and see how you can kind of get started with that. Training your employees is such a great and important step to making sure that your security stays secure.
And I'd just like to add to that, and in this pandemic moment, it is a great time to be running more awareness training with your employees because while they're not in the office, they might have very different views of what they can click and what they can't click because there's nobody looking over their shoulder. So I would strongly urge you to go out and do that. So Matt, I have a question for you here. From John. How does EDTD work with Cisco Umbrella?
That is a good question. I don't have anything immediately that comes to mind with respect to doing, like, let's say, a competitive analysis between those two specific products. But if you do reach out to us over email, we can basically work together to try to dig up something specific for you that can help answer that question.
Okay, and John, if you want that question answered, feel free, you can email me, tony.anscombe@eset.com, and I'll make sure we get the question answered for you. I think that pretty much covers, we've got a few questions here around licensing. I think as the team has said, contact your ESET representative, email one of us, and we will come back to you with questions around licensing and pricing. And I think we've, in fact, there's just one more in here. So Matt, it's definitely a question for you. Does EDTD act as a DNS filter?
You know what? That's actually a very, very good question, too, because that really kind of probably stems from the whole question with respect to Cisco Umbrella. EDTD, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, does not act as a DNS filter. It basically acts as a way to effectively have your samples analyzed in a huge environment where we can throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at it. We're not just emulating an environment here. We're talking about throwing it against a real running environment wherein it actually looks to the sample like it's running on a real live system. So with regards to that question about EDTD, ESET Dynamic Threat Defense, acting as a DNS filter, that is not one of the actual uses of that specific solution, no.
Thank you, Matt. So I think that pretty much wraps up most of the questions. If we haven't got to your question, please feel free to email the team. We will take them offline. And hopefully you've enjoyed this webinar. And we would like you to recommend our webinars to your friends and colleagues. And we will be sending you details of the next ones shortly. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Amelia. And thank you, Matt, for a great presentation. And this concludes the webinar.